The smell of roasted chicken and sweet potatoes filled my kitchen that Sunday afternoon, just like it had for the past 25 years. I was 55 years old, and hosting family Sunday lunch had become as natural to me as breathing. My hands moved with practiced precision, arranging the good china on the dining room table, the same pattern my grandmother had used for special occasions. The family ring on my finger caught the afternoon light streaming through the window, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in our family. But something felt different that day. Maybe it was the way my mother, now 78 and struggling with early dementia, kept staring at my hands with a strange intensity. Or perhaps it was the tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders for weeks, the weight of secrets that had been buried for 3 decades finally pressing against my chest like a physical force. My husband Marcus walked into the kitchen, straightening his tie. Even at 57, he still dressed up for our family gatherings, a habit I'd always loved about him. "Diane, you need any help with anything?" he asked, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. "No, baby, everything's under control," I replied, leaning into his familiar warmth. If only I had known those would be some of the last normal words we'd share as a happy couple. Our children started arriving one by one. Janet, my 30-year-old daughter, came through the front door with her 2 young boys, their laughter immediately filling the house with joy. My son Michael, 28, followed shortly after with his girlfriend Sarah. They were talking about wedding plans, their faces glowing with the kind of happiness that only comes with young love and endless possibilities. "Grandma Pearl's here," Janet announced as she helped my mother out of the car. Pearl moved slowly these days, her once sharp mind occasionally drifting into confusion, but her presence still commanded respect. She had raised me as a single mother after my father died, working 3 jobs to keep us afloat, and I owed everything I was to her strength. As we gathered around the dining room table, everything seemed perfect on the surface. The conversation flowed easily between work updates, the grandchildren's school achievements, and Michael's plans for proposing to Sarah next month. I served plates with a smile, playing the role of the family matriarch I'd perfected over the years. But then my mother's eyes locked onto my hands as I reached across the table to pour her some sweet tea. Her expression changed, becoming sharp and focused in a way I hadn't seen in months. "That ring," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the pleasant chatter like a knife. Everyone turned to look at her, then at me. I felt my heart skip a beat, but I kept my voice steady. "What about it, Mama?" She stared at the sapphire on my finger, her face contorting with confusion and something that looked almost like anger. That's not the real one." The table fell silent. Marcus looked between my mother and me, his fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean, Pearl?" he asked gently. My mother's eyes never left my hand. Years of buried memories seemed to be surfacing, and I watched in horror as pieces of a puzzle I'd hoped would stay scattered forever began clicking into place in her mind. "Diane," she said, her voice getting louder, "where is the real ring? Where is your grandmother's real ring?" I tried to laugh it off, my voice sounding forced even to my own ears. "Mama, this is the real ring. You're just confused today." But she wasn't having it. Pearl might have been struggling with dementia, but in that moment, she was more lucid than she'd been in months. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that made everyone wince. "Don't you lie to me, Diane Johnson," she shouted, using my full name the way she had when I was a child in trouble. "I know what you did. I know what you did 30 years ago." The room was spinning. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, their confusion and growing concern. Marcus reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away instinctively. "Pearl, maybe you should sit down," Marcus said, standing up to help her. "You're getting worked up over nothing." That's when it happened. The moment that would change everything. My mother looked directly at Marcus, her eyes blazing with a clarity that terrified me. She grabbed the ring right off my finger before I could react and threw it onto the floor with a force that surprised everyone. "If he only knew what you did with his grandmother's ring," she screamed. "If he only knew how his wife is nothing but a liar and a thief." The sapphire skittered across the hardwood floor and came to rest under the china cabinet. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as 4 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock. Marcus bent down slowly and picked up the ring, examining it carefully for the first time in decades. His face went pale as he held it up to the light. "Diane," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, this isn't my grandmother's ring, is it?" The weight of 30 years of secrets crashed down on me all at once. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to somehow make this right, but no words came out. The woman who had always been strong, who had held this family together through every crisis, was completely and utterly speechless. My mother sat back down heavily, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, suddenly looking confused again. "I'm sorry, baby girl. I didn't mean to. I forgot it was a secret." But the damage was done. The secret was out. And as I looked around at my family's faces, my husband's betrayal, my children's confusion, the chaos I'd brought into their lives, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. If you've ever had a secret that felt like it was eating you alive from the inside, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Write in the comments if you've ever been in a situation where the truth felt both necessary and impossible to tell. The next few minutes felt like hours. Marcus was still holding the ring, turning it over in his hands like he was seeing it for the first time. Which, in a way, he was. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear him. I wanted to lie. After 30 years of living with this secret, lying had become as natural as breathing. But looking into the faces of the people I loved most in the world, I knew the time for lies was over. "Since before we got married," I whispered. Janet gasped. Michael dropped his fork with a clatter. Marcus's face went from pale to flushed with anger in seconds. "Before we got married," he repeated, standing up so quickly his chair fell backward. "Diane, that ring was my grandmother's most precious possession. It was supposed to be passed down to our daughter. You've been wearing a fake for 25 years?" I stood up too, my whole body shaking. "Marcus, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" he shouted. "Explain how you've been lying to my face every single day for a quarter of a century. Explain how you let me give you my grandmother's ring at our wedding knowing it wasn't really hers." "Daddy, please calm down," Janet said, reaching out toward him, but he was beyond reasoning. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to tell them everything. The whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. "I sold it," I said, the words coming out in a rush. 30 years ago, I sold your grandmother's ring, and I replaced it with this replica." The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't shock anymore, this was devastation. "Why?" Michael asked, his voice breaking. At 28, he still looked like the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he was scared. "Mom, why would you do that?" I closed my eyes, letting myself remember those desperate days 3 decades ago. I was 25, working as a nurse's aide, barely making ends meet. My father was dying of cancer, and the medical bills were piling up faster than I could pay them. We were about to lose the family house, the only thing we had left after my father's long illness ate through all our savings. "My father was dying," I began, my voice stronger now. "The cancer treatment was so expensive, and we didn't have insurance that covered everything. The bills kept coming and coming and coming. We were going to lose everything." I opened my eyes and looked at Marcus. "I had just met you, remember? We'd been dating for 6 months, and you'd shown me your grandmother's ring, told me it would be mine someday when we got married. You trusted me enough to let me hold it, to admire it." Marcus's anger was slowly being replaced by something worse, disappointment. "So you stole it?" "I borrowed it," I said, even though I knew how pathetic that sounded. "I took it to a jeweler, had him make an exact replica, and sold the original. I got $15,000 for it, enough to pay off the medical bills and save our house." "You borrowed it?" Janet said, her voice incredulous. "Mom, that's stealing. You stole from the man you claimed to love." I felt tears starting to stream down my face. "I was going to buy it back. I swear to you, that was always my plan. I was going to get a better job, save every penny, and buy it back before we got married. But then your grandfather died, and there were funeral expenses, and then your father proposed sooner than I expected. Marcus was shaking his head slowly. So instead of telling me the truth, instead of asking for help, you decided to lie to me. For 30 years. I tried to buy it back so many times, I said desperately. I went to pawn shops, jewelry stores, I hired people to track it down. But it was gone, Marcus. It was gone, and I didn't know what to do. You could have told me, he said, his voice breaking. Diane, we could have figured it out together. I would have helped you. I would have understood. Would you have? I asked, and for the first time, there was anger in my voice too. Would you really have married a woman who sold your grandmother's ring? Would your mother have accepted me into the family knowing what I'd done? Marcus didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. My mother, who had been sitting quietly since her outburst, suddenly spoke up. She saved us, she said, her voice clear again. Marcus, you need to understand, she saved our whole family. Everyone turned to look at her. Pearl's eyes were focused and sharp, the way they used to be before the dementia started taking pieces of her away. That girl worked 3 jobs while her daddy was dying, she continued. 3 jobs, going to nursing school, and taking care of a sick man and a house that was falling apart around us. She sold that ring because she had no choice. She sold it because she loved her family more than she loved herself. But she lied about it, Janet said quietly. For 30 years, Mom. 30 years. I wiped my eyes and looked around the table at my family. I know I lied. I know I was wrong. But I want you to understand something, not a day has gone by that I didn't think about that ring. Not a single day that I didn't feel guilty about what I'd done. Then why didn't you tell me? Marcus asked again. Because I was terrified, I admitted. I was terrified you'd leave me. I was terrified I'd lose the only good thing in my life. And then time kept passing, and it became harder and harder to find the right moment, the right words. Marcus sat back down, still holding the fake ring. I don't know who you are anymore, he said quietly. I thought I married someone honest, someone I could trust with everything. But you've been lying to me since before we even said our vows. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about a ring anymore. This was about trust, about the foundation our entire marriage had been built on. I'm the same person I've always been, I said desperately. I'm the woman who has loved you for 30 years. I'm the woman who bore your children, who built this life with you, who has stood by your side through everything. Built on a lie, he said. And that's when I knew I was losing him. I could see it in his eyes, the love was still there, but it was buried under hurt and betrayal and the kind of disappointment that changes people forever. The family lunch ended with everyone leaving in stunned silence. No hugs goodbye, no promises to call during the week. Just the echo of my mother's words and the weight of 30 years of secrets finally seeing the light of day. That night, Marcus slept in the guest room for the first time in our marriage. And I lay alone in our bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how trying to save my family 30 years ago had ended up destroying it today. Have you ever made a choice that felt right at the time but haunted you for years afterward? Let me know in the comments, because what happened next would test every belief I had about love, forgiveness, and what it really means to fight for your family. The next few weeks passed in a blur of painful conversations, sleepless nights, and a silence in our house that felt louder than any argument. Marcus barely spoke to me except when absolutely necessary. When he did, his words were polite but cold, like I was a stranger he was forced to share space with. My children were struggling too. Janet couldn't look me in the eye without disappointment clouding her features. During one particularly difficult phone call, she said something that cut deeper than anything Marcus had said. Mom, how are we supposed to trust anything you've ever told us? If you could lie about something this big for this long, what else have you been hiding? Michael was gentler, but I could see the questions in his eyes every time he visited. He'd study my face like he was meeting me for the first time, trying to reconcile the mother he'd known with the woman who could keep such a massive secret. The worst part was that life had to continue. I still had to go to work at the hospital where I'd been a registered nurse for 15 years. I still had to smile at patients, comfort families, pretend that my own world wasn't crumbling around me. But my colleagues started noticing. My supervisor, Linda, pulled me aside after I'd mixed up medication doses for the second time in a week. "Diane, honey, what's going on with you?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "This isn't like you at all." I wanted to tell her everything. Linda and I had been friends for years, had covered each other's shifts during family emergencies, had celebrated each other's kids' graduations. But the words stuck in my throat. If I couldn't trust my own family with the truth for 30 years, how could I burden a friend with it now? "Just some personal stuff at home," I said weakly. "I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. I was falling apart, piece by piece, day by day. 3 weeks after that devastating Sunday lunch, Marcus asked me to sit down for what he called a serious conversation. We sat across from each other at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, discussed our dreams, planned our children's futures. Now it felt like we were on opposite sides of a courtroom. "I'd been thinking," he began, and I could tell from his tone that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "About us, about this marriage, about whether we can come back from this." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "And? I don't know if we can, Diane. I've been trying to understand, trying to put myself in your shoes 30 years ago, but I keep coming back to the same thing. You chose to lie to me. Every single day for 3 decades, you chose to lie." "I chose to protect us," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I chose to protect this family." "By lying," he repeated. "By building our entire marriage on deception." I felt something shift inside me then. The guilt and shame I'd been carrying started mixing with anger, not just at myself, but at him, at the situation, at how unfair it all felt. "You want to know the truth, Marcus? The whole truth?" I stood up, my hands shaking. "I sold that ring to save my father's life. I sold it to keep a roof over my family's head. I sold it because I was 25 years old and desperate and alone." "You weren't alone," he said. "You had me." "Did I?" I shot back. "Did I really?" "Because we've been dating for 6 months, Marcus." 6 months. "And you think I should have asked my new boyfriend to help me pay my dying father's medical bills?" He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him really thinking about it for the first time. "After I sold the ring, I worked every extra shift I could get at the hospital. I worked weekends, holidays, nights, anything to try to save enough money to buy it back. Do you know what I did with every extra penny I made for the first 5 years of our marriage?" Marcus shook his head. "I put it into a savings account. A secret savings account where I was trying to save enough money to track down your grandmother's ring and buy it back. I was going to surprise you with it for our 10th anniversary." His expression softened slightly. "What happened to the money?" I laughed bitterly. "Life happened. Janet needed surgery when she was 7, remember her appendix? The insurance didn't cover everything. Michael broke his arm and needed physical therapy. Your mother needed help with her mortgage after your father died. Every time I got close to having enough saved, something else came up, and I had to use the money for our family. You never told me about any savings account. Because it was supposed to be a surprise." I was crying now, angry tears that had been building up for weeks. Because I was trying to fix my mistake, to make things right, to find a way to undo what I'd done. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd told him. Finally, he said, "But you still lied, Diane. About the ring, about the money, about everything." "Yes," I said, sinking back into my chair. "I lied. I lied because I was scared and stupid and young. I lied because I loved you too much to risk losing you. I lied because once I started, I didn't know how to stop." "I need some time," he said finally. "I need to think about all of this." "How much time?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. I don't know. I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while. We both need space to figure out what we want. That night, I watched my husband of 25 years pack a suitcase and walk out of our home. As his car pulled out of the driveway, I realized I was more alone than I'd ever been in my life. But sometimes, being alone is when you find out who you really are. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called in sick to work, got dressed in my best outfit, and drove to the jewelry district downtown. If I was going to lose my family anyway, I was going to go down fighting. It took me 3 days of visiting every pawn shop, antique dealer, and jewelry store in a 50-mile radius, but I finally found someone who remembered the ring. Mrs. Chen, the elderly owner of a small jewelry shop that had been in her family for 40 years, looked at the photos I'd brought and nodded slowly. "Oh yes," she said in her accented English, "I remember this piece. Very beautiful, very old. Sold it to a collector maybe 25 years ago. Do you remember who?" I asked, my heart racing. She disappeared into her back office and emerged with an old ledger book. "Here," she said, pointing to an entry with her finger. "Mr. Harrison. He collects estate jewelry." It took me another week to track down Mr. Harrison. He was in his 80s now, living in a retirement home across town. When I explained who I was and why I was there, he studied my face carefully. "You're the young lady who sold this ring 30 years ago," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. And I'd like to buy it back, if it's possible." He was quiet for a long time, then slowly got up and walked to a safe in the corner of his small apartment. When he turned around, he was holding a small velvet box. Inside was Marcus's grandmother's ring, exactly as beautiful as I remembered it. "I've been wondering when you'd come for this," Mr. Harrison said softly. "A ring this beautiful, with this much history, it should be with family. How much do you want for it?" I asked, though I had no idea where I'd get the money. He smiled. "Nothing. I'm sorry. I'm 87 years old, dear. My children don't care about old jewelry, and I'll be gone soon enough. This ring wants to go home." I started crying right there in his living room. This stranger was showing me more kindness than my own family had in weeks. "But there is one condition," he said. "Anything. You have to promise me you'll tell the truth about where it's been. No more lies, no more secrets. This ring deserves better than that." I promised. Walking out of that retirement home with the original ring in my purse felt like the first step toward redemption. But I knew getting the ring back was the easy part. Rebuilding trust with my family would be much harder. That evening, I called Marcus. "Can you come over? There's something I need to show you." "Diane, I told you I need time." "Please," I interrupted. "Just this once. After tonight, I'll give you all the time and space you need." An hour later, he was sitting across from me at our kitchen table again, looking tired and older than his 57 years. I placed the small velvet box on the table between us. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." When he saw his grandmother's ring, the real one, his face went completely white. He picked it up with shaking hands, examining it carefully. "How?" was all he managed to say. I told him everything. About my week-long search, about Mrs. Chen and her ledger book, about Mr. Harrison and his kindness. I told him about the secret savings account I'd maintained for years, about every sacrifice I'd made trying to undo my mistake. "I know I can't change what I did 30 years ago," I said when I finished. "I know I can't take back the lies or the hurt I've caused. But I want you to know that not a day went by that I didn't regret what I did. Not a single day that I didn't love you enough to wish I'd been braver from the beginning." Marcus was crying now, still holding the ring. "Diane. I'm not asking you to forgive me," I continued. "I'm not even asking you to come home. I just needed you to know that I never stopped fighting to make this right. Even when it seemed impossible, even when I thought I'd lost everything, I kept fighting for us." He looked up at me then, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something other than hurt in his eyes. I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 30 years ago. "I love you," he said quietly. "Even after everything, even though I'm angry and hurt and confused, I still love you." "I love you too," I whispered. "But I don't know if love is enough to fix this." And that's when I realized that getting the ring back was just the beginning. The real fight for my family was just starting. Don't go anywhere, because what I decided to do next would either save my marriage or destroy it completely. And the answer would come from the most unexpected place imaginable. Over the next month, Marcus started coming by the house more often. Not to stay, he was still living at his brother's, but to talk, to try to work through the mess we'd made of our lives. We went to couples counseling, where I learned that forgiveness isn't just something you give once and it's over. It's something you have to choose every single day. Our therapist, Dr. Williams, helped us understand something crucial. My lie hadn't just been about a ring. It had been about trust, communication, and the fundamental way we related to each other. Marcus felt like he'd been living with a stranger for 30 years, and I felt like I'd been carrying the weight of the world alone. "Diane," Dr. Williams said during one particularly intense session, "why do you think you felt like you had to handle your father's medical crisis by yourself?" I thought about it for a long time. Because that's what I'd always done. Since I was little, whenever there was a problem in my family, I was the one who fixed it. I was the strong one, the one who figured things out. "And Marcus," she turned to my husband, "how did that make you feel, learning that Diane didn't trust you enough to share her burden?" "Like I failed as a partner," he said quietly. "Like she didn't think I was strong enough or reliable enough to help her through a crisis." It was the first time either of us had articulated it that way, and it hit like a lightning bolt. My lie hadn't just hurt Marcus, it had robbed him of the chance to be the partner he'd wanted to be. Meanwhile, my relationship with my children was slowly healing too, but it was painful work. Janet, especially, struggled with feeling like she didn't really know who I was anymore. "It's not just the ring, Mom," she said during one of our long conversations. "It's that you could keep such a huge secret for so long. It makes me wonder what else you haven't told us." "Nothing," I assured her. "There's nothing else, baby. This was it, this was the only secret." "But how am I supposed to believe that?" she asked, and I didn't have a good answer. Michael was more forgiving, but I could see the questions in his eyes too. During family dinners that Marcus still wasn't attending, there would be moments of awkward silence where I knew they were all thinking about the lies, about what they thought they knew versus what was real. The breaking point came 6 weeks after that terrible Sunday lunch. I was at work, trying to focus on my patients despite everything falling apart at home, when I got a call from Janet. "Mom," she said, her voice shaky, "I need you to come to the hospital. It's Grandma Pearl." My mother had fallen and broken her hip. At 78, with dementia already affecting her quality of life, it was serious. I rushed to the emergency room to find my whole family gathered there, including Marcus, who'd come as soon as he heard. As we sat in that sterile waiting room, watching the clock tick by while my mother underwent surgery, something shifted between all of us. Maybe it was the reminder of how fragile life really is, or maybe it was seeing each other in crisis again, but the anger started to feel less important than the love. "She's going to be okay," Marcus said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. It was the first time he'd touched me in weeks, and I felt tears spring to my eyes. "I hope so," I whispered. "She's tougher than all of us," Janet said, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled at me. "Remember when she worked 3 jobs to put you through nursing school?" "She never complained," I said. "Not once." "Like mother, like daughter," Michael added quietly. I looked around at my family, my husband who was slowly finding his way back to me, my children who were learning to trust me again, and I realized something important. We were all flawed people doing the best we could with impossible situations. My lie had hurt them, but my love for them had never wavered. When my mother came out of surgery, she was groggy and confused, but alive. The doctor said the operation had gone well, but her recovery would be long and difficult. "Can I see her?" I asked. In the recovery room, my mother looked so small and fragile in that hospital bed. When she saw me, her eyes cleared for a moment. "Diane, baby," she whispered. "I'm here, Mama." "I'm sorry about the ring," she said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I'm sorry I told your secret." I took her hand gently. "Mama, you don't have anything to apologize for. You did the right thing. Secrets are poison, they eat you up from the inside." "Are you going to be okay?" she asked. I looked through the window of her room and saw Marcus sitting with Janet and Michael, all of them waiting for me, worried about both my mother and me. "Yeah, Mama," I said. "I think we're all going to be okay." That night, Marcus came home. Not to stay permanently, we both knew we still had work to do, but to be there during my mother's crisis. As we sat on the couch together, both exhausted from the day, he said something that gave me hope. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being 25 and scared and alone." I waited for him to continue. "I was 27 then, and I thought I was so mature, so ready for anything. But the truth is, if someone had told me my girlfriend's father was dying and she needed $15,000 to save him, I probably would have freaked out. I probably would have felt overwhelmed and scared too." "You don't know that," I said. "Maybe not. But I know I wasn't as strong then as I thought I was. And I know that what you did, sacrificing something precious to save your family, that took courage." "It took stupidity," I corrected. "Maybe both," he said with a small smile. The next few months weren't easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. But slowly, day by day, conversation by conversation, we started rebuilding what we'd lost. Marcus moved back home, but we kept going to counseling. We established new rules about communication, about sharing our burdens instead of carrying them alone. My mother's recovery was slow, but it brought our family closer together. Taking care of her gave us a shared purpose, a reason to work together instead of letting our hurt keep us apart. And that original ring? We decided to do something special with it. On our 26th wedding anniversary, a year after the truth came out, Marcus gave it to Janet, just as his grandmother had always intended. "This ring has seen enough secrets," he said as he slipped it onto our daughter's finger. "From now on, it only knows truth and love." But the story doesn't end there. Because the most important lesson I learned wasn't about honesty or trust or forgiveness, though those things mattered enormously. The most important lesson was about strength, real strength, not the kind that comes from carrying burdens alone, but the kind that comes from letting the people who love you help carry them. If you're struggling with a secret that feels too big to share, I want you to know something: the people who truly love you are stronger than you think. They might be hurt, they might be angry, they might need time to process, but real love, the kind worth fighting for, can survive the truth. The real revenge isn't keeping secrets that poison your relationships. The real revenge is living authentically, loving boldly, and trusting that the people who matter will choose to stay and fight for you, just like you'd fight for them. 6 months later, I was promoted to head nurse at the hospital. Michael and Sarah got married in our backyard, and my mother, despite her challenges, walked down the aisle as his grandmother should. Marcus started his own business, and for the first time in years, we made decisions as true partners. Most importantly, we learned to talk to each other, really talk, about fears and dreams and the things that keep us up at night. No more secrets, no more carrying the weight of the world alone. The ring saga taught us something invaluable. Sometimes the things we think will destroy us are actually the things that make us stronger. Sometimes the truth we're most afraid to tell is the very thing that sets us free. And sometimes, just sometimes, the family you think you've lost forever is actually just waiting for you to be brave enough to let them love the real you, flaws, mistakes, and all. That's the kind of revenge I can live with. That's the kind of ending worth fighting for. Subscribe if you enjoyed this story, and remember, your secrets don't define you, but your courage to share them with the people you love? That's where your real strength lies. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart. Your story matters too, and you never know who needs to hear it.